is now 11. The meeting resumes. Right. No member has asked to speak. If there is no question, then I can only put this paper to the vote. Yes, please ring the bell. Please ring the bell. There is a call, a division call. Just now we resume our meeting at 11 and no one asked to speak. I can only follow the procedure and put the proposal to the vote. Well, there was no quorum, and therefore I ring the bell. Is it a quorum call? It's a division call. I can only follow the procedure. I have waited. We resume our meeting at 11. Now we have resumed our meeting. Mr. Chair asks for ringing the bell. Mr. Chair asks for the bell because he asks for you, and I came at 11. I waited for a minute, and then no one asked for the floor, so I can only follow the procedure. Mr. Chair asked for a division, and therefore there was the bell. Mr. Fan, what is point of order? Many members were next door to deal with the motions, and then they came back to room 2 and wait for the floor in respect of the high-tech DCS. We waited for the floor. It was not unlike what you described. There was no one who asked for the floor, so you put the proposal to vote. When I was walking back to room 2, I heard the bell. The chairman has to confirm. When you asked for the division bell, there was no quorum. Mr. Chair asked for a division. Let me explain. That was what happened. Now we have a quorum. It is right for Mr. Chair to ask for the division bell. That is the same for the LegCo meeting. The division bell. Whether there was a quorum or not, the division bell can be rung, and after 5 minutes, it was okay to ask for the quorum. I can only explain the procedure. I can only work according to the rules of procedure. Chairman, now yesterday at the LegCo meeting during the division bell, at that time there were less than 3 persons present, and there was the bell. I came at 11. I waited for a while. I can only follow the rules. At that time, Mr. Chair asked for the division bell, and members can come back and cast a vote. If after the division bell there was no quorum, then we'll have to make a quorum call. So you need to follow the procedure. I have no choice. I'm the chairman. I can only follow the rules. I'm pretty sure that there was a break, and then after the break, then the meeting resumed. Now, please cast your vote before I declare the voting closed. Please check your votes. Okay, voting is closed. Results displayed. 28 present, 15 for, 11 against, 1 abstention. The proposal is carried. Do members ask for the item to be separately voted? Yes, Dr. Kwok asked for that. Some members said it was outrageous, but if you look at the situation, the chairman can only follow the rules. We now move on. The next item. Next item Agenda item number 2, 768 CEO studies related to the artificial islands in central waters, PWSC 2019-20, paper 5. The paper proposes to recommend the Defense Committee the upgrading of 768 CO to Category A at an estimated cost of $550.4 million in MOD prices. The administration 26th of March consulted the development panel on the proposed project on the 13th and 24th of April. The panel had special meetings to listen to views of the public, and the members supported the proposal and be recommended for consideration by this committee. To answer members' questions, we have Under Secretary for Development, Mr. Liu, Mr. Vincent Mack, Deputy Secretary for Development, Mr. Ricky Lau, Director of Civil Engineering and Development, Mr. Michael Fong, Heads of Sustainable Lantau Office, Mr. Johnson Wong, Deputy Head of Sustainable Lantau Office, Mr. Gringer Kiang, Deputy Head of the Sustainable Lantau Office, Mr. Robin Lee, Principal Project Coordinator, Sustainable Lantau Office, Ms. Doris Ho, Deputy Secretary for Development, and Mr. Ivan Chong, Deputy Director of Planning. Dr. K.K. Kwok, your first round, 4 minutes. First of all, before I speak, you being the chairman, what you've done is try to defend the government, and that is indeed shameful. Let me turn to the artificial islands. In the past decade or so, because of these political projects, we have spent hundreds of billions of dollars. As for the East Lantau artificial island, the government is throwing our hard-earned money into the sea. The artificial island is to provide housing, but we have more than 2,000 hectares of vacant land, 1,000 hectares earmarked for village small houses, 1,500 brownfield sites, and all do not require any money. Now estimated to be $600 billion, and the bill will be more than 1,000 billion. The money is not for hospitals, not for buying cancer drug, but for this politically motivated projects. The government has the ability to build more houses. Even the court has ruled that there is no need to earmark land for very small houses, and you are going slow on brownfield sites. For Wang Chao, they divided into phases 1, 2, 3 in order to protect those on the brownfield sites, whether they are village landowners or big landowners or those who destroy farmland?
Well, now we have to have about 500 million, more than 500 million. We know that for the East Lantau, the administration says that it is a new metropolis. Metropolis is not where the poor would live. It is right smack in the middle of the big Bay Area. So 9 plus 2, the mainlanders would be coming to the artificial island. So this metropolis on the artificial island, you are attracting money from mainland. The administration is very cunning. There is no estimation of the price of buildings, etc. But you are using the figures for estimations from the societies. You are now speaking about 20,000 per square foot. Is it for Hong Kong people to live? But you are only providing for the Bay Area. You are now hurting Hong Kong.
我有留意到郭家麒議員呢個講法嘅，不過
Okay. Of course, well, for the Gaoyizhou artificial island, it will be developed into an area for 400,000 to 700,000 populated new town area. It is also the third CBD with 200,000 employment, and this is for Hong Kong people. As for housing, 20,000 per square foot. Who is going to live there? Well, it is an estimated per foot price. But I'd like to remind you, on the artificial island, 70% are public housing, including all kinds of public housing, rentals or sold. So these are for Hong Kong permanent residents. And there are also private buildings, private housing. It doesn't mean that the private housing is for the people from the GBA, but who is going to buy it is 20,000 per foot. For the young people, well, for the we know that the house pricing is very high, and everybody shares this view, and we hope to have more land supply so that the housing price would be more stable and affordable. Mr. Holden Chow. For the studies related to artificial islands in the central waters, I believe that it is time to start such studies. First of all, according to the estimates, when the artificial island is made, we can have 260,000 units for housing. Of course, there should be an appropriate rate proportion between the private housing and public housing. 70% for public and 30% for private housing. Very often, people would say that it shouldn't be done this way. They should have brownfield sites development in order to provide housing. However, the brownfield site and urban renewal are really very drawn out. And 10 years already, and we have the North-East New Territories development only starting. So these are very difficult undertakings. In this situation, we have to be responsible for the younger generation. How can we seriously and responsibly solve the problem for the housing of the younger generation? We should have land development on a larger scale, and that is to say, I think that the artificial islands in central waters is the right direction to take. We have also heard that some people would say that the reclamation costs, it would be about 1,000 billion money thrown into the sea. However, some fine thinking should go into that before you put out such a statement. According to the administration papers, the estimation is that for land sales, we should have about 700 billion revenue. And for the reclamation costs, for the according to the estimation, is about 25 billion, excluding roads, etc. If you have land sales, and if you take into account the estimation of costs, well, if you say that it is 100 billion thrown into the sea, I think it is some unfounded threatening statement. And I think that is really too much subjective without clear thinking behind it. As for transport, and this study will include the connecting rail, connecting rail for the island, for the Lantau, and for the northeast territories. But studies are studies. However, for the infrastructure connecting Lantau and connecting the Hong Kong Island, or connecting to Tuen Mun, or connecting to other areas, I feel that this is something that we have always thought that is necessary and should be speeded up. The paper said the North Lantau Road, there is a P1 that can solve the future needs. Well, for this present studies, this P1 Lantau Road will alleviate the congestion. Do you have a specific timetable for that? The P1 road, the P1 highway, well, for the second half of the year, we will come for financing for feasibility studies. First round, Mr. Fan, 4 minutes. Members coming around from the other venue, you are eliminating their position in the queue for speaking, and this is the same as the criticism levied against Mr. Low. It is the same. I think this is an insult to the chairman. You have to take it back. No, I won't take it back. It is your way of conducting the meeting. We are following the queuing for position. Mr. Chuaitik, don't shout from your seat. Mr. Fan, please take back what you have said. I don't take it back because it is an objective, based on objective reality. When we are proceeding from the other venue, the venue has no quorum, and there are members still queuing to speak. And in the venue 1, for the transport panel and for the we have a motion that we had to vote. And once we voted, we left the venue and came back to take up our responsibilities. However, you have expropriated our turn to speak, and you have voted without a quorum. Mr. Fan, I will repeat the procedure. According to the meeting of the LegCo, even if you have been waiting at a queue to speak, but if you are not present, the chair will follow the procedure and move on to the next item. I'm only following the procedure. I cannot resume the meeting without budging, without doing anything. It is impossible. Well, you should wait till the quorum is formed, and you should have waited. Those who are queuing, they are not leaving the main venue for other things, but to vote in the next venue. Well, I cannot wait for enough quorum because, as in the other electrical meeting, when you are coming to a vote, and if you ask for the bell, then the bell, of course, will ring. However, whether there will be a quorum or not, the bell will ring. However, once the bell is rung and the quorum has not been formed, you can ask again. Perhaps you are not really aware of the real situation, and I'm explaining the real situation. I believe that I followed the procedure and was correct in conducting the meeting. However, the wording that you have used are offensive and are not acceptable. Are you willing to take back from what I deem to be offensive statement? Mr. Fan, I had made a criticism that was in keeping with reality and the procedure. Chair, I have already explained the real situation. Whether you accept my explanation is another matter. However, your offensive statement is not correct. That is why I invite you to take back your offensive statement. No, I don't take it back. My criticism, well, I have no other choice but invite you to leave the meeting. Mr. Fan, I can do nothing more. You can criticize, but offensive statements should be taken back. Mr. Fan, would you take back your incorrect or offensive statement? I am basing myself on the reality and objective circumstances. Because members have to take part in the 2 meetings, and we are being our right to speak and the right to vote have been taken away from us, and I object to your way of conducting the meeting. You have voiced your objection. Whether you accept the explanation or not is not the crux of the matter here. But the question is, the issue here is the offensive statement that you've made, not the criticism that you have made. Mr. Juhaidik, it's not your time to speak. Mr. Fan, would you reconsider my invitation? I do not object your making criticism. However, making offensive statement is not right. Mr. Chairman, members, once voted from the other venue, we have made our way here, and you should not underhand way is a wording that you should take back. You have the right to criticize, and I've already explained the situation. Cunning or underhand way are offensive words that I would like you to take back. You are offending the right to speak and to raise questions. I would repeat again, underhand and cunning are the words that you have to take back. If you do not take them back, then you have to leave the meeting. Mr. Fan, please leave the meeting. Mr. Chu Haidik, if you are shouting from your seat, I will deem you to be misbehaving. The next member to speak, Mr. Leung Chi-cheng, 4 minutes. Thank you. For the study related to the artificial islands in the central waters, I've always supported it all along. Once the plan of the artificial islands are made, the new roads and railways can be connected to the Hong Kong Island and to the Northeast territories, new territories. Of course, I would support it. Since we are undertaking studies, then we should make it in such a way as to meet the requirements of the islands, people living there. For instance, the Pingzhou inhabitants, they are wondering if artificial islands once built, there would be another bridge or another footbridge connecting with their island so that they can have a land connection. Would that be taken into consideration? The reclamation scheme would be causing some damages to fishery. Mr. Stephen Ho would raise such a question, and he had already raised such a question. Well, for the fishery, for the fishing folk, would you have compensation for them, or would you retrain them? Would you be taking care of those affected, the fishing people affected? There are 300 people for the public hearing. About 200 came, and most of them supported the scheme. And I think the administration should take into account the views that I've made. Thank you for Mr. Leung's support. You have two issues, whether there could be a land connection to Pingzhou. Well, in our initial scheme, there is no such a land connection. However, we have heard views expressed, and we would have some more public hearing. As for the fishing population, we will have a detailed Gao Yijiao artificial island scheme, and we will have preliminary assessment, and the studies themselves will seek for solutions to the fishing population that would be impacted on. Mr. Oh Lok Hin, for the studies related to artificial islands in the central waters, you have already done quite a number of studies. For instance, the Kennedy Town transport studies, they have already been put out. The results of the studies for the administration only look for development. However, the problems discussed in the studies are very rarely taken into account in further studies.
Hello.
Every time when we argue whether we should have Lantau tomorrow, and then when you don't have logical arguments, you will just say, can't we just do some studies? I'm not saying you can't do studies. But after doing your studies, the consultants might identify problems in their reports. Let me talk about the consultants' findings. From Khao Yi Chau to Sunny Bay, if you develop a road between them, it will be beyond the estimated capacity. And the consultant said if it's not going to be a toll-paying road, you're not going to be able to cope with the traffic flow. And then there is something else. That result is based on one presumption, and that is you're going to build Route 4. If you don't build Route 4, it will be even more serious from Kennedy Town to Khao Yi Chau or other trunk routes on Lantau in the future. The capacity will be exceeded so that it will be just like the portal of the Hong Kong Cross Harbour Tunnel. And even if you have Route 4, the consultants are saying that the road between Khao Yi Chau and Sunny Bay will always be overcrowded, and the situation would be worse than the Cross Harbour Tunnel. This is what your consultants say. So how are you going to respond? Is it that you should adopt such development parameters so that you won't even give regard to the possible traffic congestion? Officials. The technical study between Khao Yi Chau to East Lantau, I will defer to the CEDD in a moment. From the final results of the consultancy, we don't see any insurmountable problems, so it is regarded as feasible. In that study, we have tested different scenarios. If there are problems with certain scenarios, it doesn't mean that the plan cannot go ahead. Can I defer to CEDD? Director, Mr. Ricky Lau. Thank you. The transport study is in the public domain. It is on our website. I'd like to add one point here. The transport study was done at an early stage, and the parameters are not exactly the same now. You mean they have become better? Well, we have, if the ratio is beyond 1, it would be very similar to the Cross Harbour Tunnel. Are you talking about the technology side? Sorry, you are overlapping. Do you know what is V and C ratio? You must know it as an engineer. Sorry, Mr. Lau. The time is up, but please have some patience. Allow Mr. Lau to answer you. Thank you, Chairman. We have made public the report, and we knew that readers of that report might have that kind of interpretation. And therefore, we have also made public the explanatory notes to explain that the study report might not be exactly the same with reality. But we are confident that the overall transport infrastructure will be able to be sustained. So you are regarding the report as one done by Professor Nelson Chow. You are just putting it aside, right? Well, your question has been answered and your time is up. Edward Lau. About this study into the artificial island in the central waters, we support it. It's a big project. We need to do comprehensive study to know the views of the stakeholders and also the feasibility of the project. The LegCo has also conducted public hearings on this, and we have heard a lot of support. Of course, some deputations raised questions, but those questions were repetitive. Even today, they are still using those questions to query the project. And now I give you the chance to explain further. First, people say we have brownfield sites, we have agricultural land. Why don't you use brownfield sites instead of going for reclamation? My question for the Bureau is this reclamation going to affect the development of existing brownfield sites? Or are there other ways for you to find land for housing? Understood. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for your support. In simple terms, the Task Force on Land Supply put forward 8 recommendations after public consultation, and we have adopted them all. In simple terms, we are going to use a multi-pronged approach to embark on all those recommendations. Brownfield sites is an important option. As we said, in the few NDAs, brownfield sites are found in Kutong North, Fanling North. We know we have dozens of hectares of brownfield sites. And we thank the FC for approving the funding for Phase 1 of Kutong North and Fanling North projects. And in Hong Shui Kiu, we have about 200 hectares of brownfield sites. We plan to apply for Phase 1 funding in the latter half of the year. So it's clear we are working at full steam with brownfield sites, and that is not affected by the study about the central waters, meaning the 8 recommendations are not mutually exclusive, that you have the ability to go for reclamation and also to work with brownfield sites at the same time. Is that right? Yes, Chairman. My next question is, members of the public are worried that you will go for reclamation and you are not going to reclamation and you are not going to do other things. But now that is clear. Another point for clarification, we are producing construction and demolition waste, or C&D, every day. Can this be taken to the central waters for doing reclamation? You may not have the plans now because we have not reclaimed land for the sea from the sea for a long time. So where has the C&D waste where has it gone in the interim? Well, we call this C&D waste or public fill. Indeed, it can be used as fill. Can I ask the CEDD to give you details? Mr. Ricky Lau. Thank you, Chair. In Hong Kong now, we have about 15 million tons of C&D waste or inertia or inert waste. These 15 million tons of fill can be used for reclamation. Say, for example, that at Tung Chung and also the 3rd runway. This is being used, and we hope we can use such fill for creating the artificial island so we don't have to use so much mechanical sand or sea sand. Right now, the fill that is not used up is moved back to the mainland for the sake of reclamation. Mr. Ray Chan, 4 minutes. First, I'd like to comment on the voting arrangement. You cannot compare yourself with the council. The council is the only meeting in session. If you don't sit there, you give up your right. But today we have 2 concurrent meetings. And it's not just that. The other meeting was conducting a vote. Therefore, we should not clash meetings. And even if there will be clashing of meetings, you must adopt the most lenient way to allow members to vote and ask questions. Okay, coming back to this paper. Just now, Mr. Holden Chow said that people criticized for you for putting 1 trillion into the sea. Well, this is the slogan of many citizens, and this is also their worry. According to the Institute of Surveyors, the land sales would give you about 70 million or 110 million. Okay, I take it back. Your estimate is right, but you have to tell the public. When will you be able to recoup your costs from land sales? You have to let the public know. You cannot say it's just a slogan and dismiss it. You have to convince people with figures and reason. Number 2, On the 26th of March, at the development panel, I raised 3 questions. One, whether there are preset criteria for the advanced study. Why don't you include preservation of ocean resources? You have only answered 2 questions. We are going to use 550 million for this advanced study, which will go on for 45 months. But then a lot of changes can take place. On the 26th of March, at development panel, from that day to today, a lot of changes have taken place. You wouldn't have predicted that the US-China trade war would actually erupt, and people were actually buying stocks at that time. Now, if there would be huge losses for the Hong Kong Treasury, would there be a stipulation that the consultancy should look into such scenarios? You can't say that there would have to be a predetermined result that it is financially feasible. If there is a turn in the economy and you don't have revenue, would you set a limit to how the surplus or reserves should be depleted, and then you would reconsider the feasibility or even call a stop to the project, which may cost eventually $1 trillion? Understood. I'd like to clarify certain figures. Just now, Mr. Chan said that according to the Institute of Surveyors, well, actually, their estimated price was about 900 billion to 1.1 trillion. No, I was saying it was 70 million upwards. Okay, but you have clarified. Second point, about recouping our cost. We said many times before, our present estimate is 624 million or 624 billion, basing on 2019 prices, 624 billion. Whether it is about the building of the artificial island or in terms of investing into priority roads and railways, we are responding to the aspirations of the public. The artificial island is not for land sales to get profits for the government. You must clarify the original purpose. And we explained many times about the financial side. In the coming few years, well, continue. I will be very brief. In the coming few years, public works would cost more than 100 billion. If 600 billion will be apportioned over 8-10 years, we can certainly support it because it would be 40 to 50 billion per year. When we do our financial feasibility study, well, it is not right for us to, and not logical at all, for us to predetermine the result, and that is not something we're going to do. But then if the economy will take a turn for the worse, are there financial indicators to tell you that you should stop the study? Understood. Well, I think the financial feasibility study doesn't work with any indicators yet. We will think about it when the study starts, and we'll see what views the consultant has. Alice Mack, first round. I want the administration to answer a simple question first. This project is for the study, right? It is not about actual building the artificial island. We are just talking about a study, is that right? Yes. But on the other hand, we might also do some site investigation, like drilling holes. But this is part of the study. I'm saying this because many members registered their worries, but I think Mr. Chan had said it very well, that if he is saying that throwing $1 trillion into the sea is just a slogan, and that he is asking you to convince the public with figures and facts. So through this study, you will be able to identify those figures and the supporting reasons. So the public will be able to give some objective consideration to the project. And when they say 1 trillion, you say no. And then when you say you can recoup your cost, they say no. And then when you say the housing can help the public, then they will say you use the housing for speculation. So actually, we should have a study, and then we all know how the artificial island project can help us address the issue of shortage of land and inadequate supply of housing. What I want to say is the public envy Singapore and their housing board developments. In Singapore, the housing prices were high, and that was in 2012, 2013. And what did the Singaporean government do? The public housing building was increased from 10,000 to 20,000, and it went on for 2 years, and then it stabilized the market. Why could Singapore do it? It is because they have land. Starting from the 90s, they created land and increased it by 25% with reclamation. And they have so much land that they can at once address a housing problem. And their final aim is for Singaporeans to have affordable housing. I think this is what all members here want to do, regardless of your party affiliation, and that is that the public should have affordable housing. So I support this study. I hope we can put our finger on a figure so the public will understand the importance of the artificial island because it increases land supply, so we can address the housing problem. At the same time, I'd like the administration to say something. At the panel, I asked the same thing. Many people are worried that there will be a budget overrun, there will be delays. Will you also look into mechanisms which can ensure that there will be proper monitoring of the project? Maybe there can be a monitoring department within the government, because this is going to be a mammoth project. This indeed is not a run-of-the-mill project. You are building the artificial island, and there is a railway project as well. How can you monitor them so they will not overrun in terms of time and money? Understood. Thank you, Ms. Mack, for your support. First, I agree with you. We'd like to land on more figures by using or doing the study. Please be brief. When we come to apply for funding to implement the project, we hope to be able to show you all the figures and to show you that this is a worthy project. As to whether we can think about that mechanism in this study, this is not necessary, because in the PA last year, we would set up another steering committee to monitor the implementation of the entire project. Next, Mr. Jeremy Tam, 4 minutes. Just like other members, I think your handling of the voting procedure just now was very improper. Coming back here, my first question is, in Appendix 1, or Enclosure 1, there is a map to the south of Cheung Chau. You say there may be a Cheung Chau South artificial island. I'd like to ask whether this funding request includes that possible island. Understood. Chair. The artificial island we are talking about is the 100 or 1,000 hectare one in Khao Yi Chau. But we are going to get certain information about Cheung Chau South. It will be for long-term planning. So we are not going to study into that artificial island. We're just taking advantage of this study to get basic information about that island. But you are deviating from what the CE said. You are only going to build an artificial island of 1,000 hectares.
主席，我唔覺
The Secretary, I don't think that's a departure or deviation. With regard to the Lantau tomorrow, we focus on the 1,000 hectare Khao Yi Chau artificial island. But as for Hailing Chow and Eastern Waters, whether more can be done. We want to seek more information for future planning reference. What is future planning reference? Now, the task force refers to the amount of land needed, and you say one artificial island is enough, 1,000 hectares. Why you tamper with Cheung Chau South? As for Cheung Chau South or Hailing Chow, nearby Hailing Chow, if we are to have an artificial island, Chairman, that's not right. We're against the project. That's really clear, and you need to be above board. Whether it's the policy address, you just refer to 1,000 hectares. Even Carrie Lam referred to 1,700 hectares. That's this one. And now you move on to Cheung Chau South. Now, you refer to 2018 policy address. Am I correct? Yes, indeed. Yes, 2018 policy address. The policy address said 1,000 hectares. All the papers show that it was 1,000 hectares, and now suddenly you touch on Cheung Chau South. What's the problem? Now, the first stage of study is 1,000 hectares, Khao Yi Chow Artificial Island. As for the tomorrow, Lantau tomorrow is not just Khao Yi Chow. It's not reasonable to move on to Cheung Chau South. So will you move to Mars or to North Pole? That's the future. That's about moving people of Hong Kong to the moon. Or Carrie Lam number 7. Well, we cannot extend beyond the land of Hong Kong or territory of Hong Kong. We are discussing the Central Waters Artificial Island, and Cheung Chau South is within that area. What is your definition of Central Waters? To put it simply, it is between the waters between Lantau and Hong Kong Island. Well, it is south of Cheung Chau, south of Hong Kong Island. Now, the Central Waters is between Lantau and Hong Kong Island. Mr. Alvin Young, I want to ask a question in relation to the principle. Is there any chance that after we've funded the feasibility study, and if the outcome is negative, will that make the government refrain from doing the artificial island? Will you have an answer which says that it is not feasible? Well, when it comes to the feasibility study, we cannot say at the start whether it's feasible or not feasible. But before we conduct this feasibility study, we have done some technical study, and there is no unsurmountable environmental or engineering difficulties. So the conclusion is that it is very likely that it is feasible, but we cannot definitely say it is feasible. Or it is definitely not feasible because of certain conditions. We have to wait for the outcome of the report. I just want to know whether the SARG has turned back on the project because of the feasibility study, which said that it was not feasible. According to your understanding, was there such an incident? Well, I cannot answer that because there were many studies, and it's impossible for me to know all the studies and the past and the outcomes of those studies. If I may assist the Bureau, within this term of the SARG, is there any feasibility study which came up with the conclusion that it was not feasible, and the SARG listened to that good advice. The same answer. I cannot answer this question. There were only 2 years in this SARG, which started from the 1st of July 2017. No, as far as I know. So I want to ask the civil servants who have served the SARG for so long, since 1997, do you have any impression that there was a feasibility study which said that the project was not feasible? The Secretary. You don't need to guess. I think those sitting at the back had already prompted him. The Chairman, I don't have information in hand. I see the hand of Mr. Lau, the Director of CEDD. Chairman, if I may add, there were feasibility studies done earlier, Silho Bay reclamation. We did that, and we saw that the report and our decision was not to conduct a large-scale reclamation according to the feasibility study. We might need to do some small-scale reclamation because of the trunk road. We do look closely to the feasibility study. I want to learn from this experience. After there is the feasibility study and the recommendation is that it is feasible, and there is an amendment to the proposal. What is the basis of the amendment? The Undersecretary. Chairman, generally speaking, apart from technical feasibility, we have to consider other factors, say financially. Take Silho One as example. I'll ask Mr. Lau, the Director, to speak on that. Time is overrun. Well, please be brief. In Silho One, there is the issue of Chinese white dolphins, and also land use constraints. And therefore, at present, what we see is that the development at Silho One will first be the land needed for the construction of Road T1. Next, Mr. Tony Chair, 4 minutes. Hong Kong is suffering from acute shortage of land for housing. The government adopts a multi-pronged approach to increase land supply, and the long-term solution is to reclaim land outside the Victoria Harbour. I support this principle, and my profession supports this principle. The reclamation will have far-reaching implications. There may be different kinds of impacts. There's a need to conduct a study, therefore. My constituency is very concerned about this, and therefore they have provided quite a number of comments. At the development panel, there was a discussion, and there were public hearing meetings or public hearings, and my constituency has given its views, and later on I will speak on the responses given by the administration to the views of my constituency and also the follow-up work. Because of the shortage of time, I will first speak on the $550 million of funding for the study. In paragraph 3, the scope of work is mentioned. At the public hearings, many commented on this. It is about the vision of the artificial island. The policy address also said something on this. The paper gives people the impression, and purely the impression. Part A, they transport infrastructure study has a lot of coverage. How you achieve your vision is something which is lacking in explanation, and that's sensitive. The artificial island of the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge is an example that its planning is very bad. And I raised this at the LegCo CE questioning session. It was considered just from the perspective of transportation infrastructure. It was not taken. It has not taken into account future economic activities and other human activities. After people moved into work or even to live, community facilities are just work in progress. People are just working or living on a work site. So infrastructure should come first. Yet, the scope of the study works the other way around. It is transport infrastructure first, engineering works first. How can you drop a vision that it is a place for people to live and work in favorable conditions? Don't you have this impression? The Undersecretary, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chairman. With regard to the vision of the artificial island, we have provided this in paragraph 10. We want to have a smart city, a core business district, an example for good living, green living. Well, as for which come first, when we do the planning and engineering study, we have to provide the information, input the information, and then consider them together. Ms. Claudia Mo, your first round, 4 minutes. Chairman, I don't know whether, well, Chairman, you give people the impression that you're in a hurry. But I oppose the way you are handling this. It's really immoral. You dare to say, you have the face to say the Chinese white dolphin. You're not qualified. In fact, you've jumped the queue. You say you do the easy piece first, but you jump the queue as you like. That's the attitude of the government. It calls the shots. It is a king. The government is a king and can do anything it likes. So you're afraid of the office in the Western District? We have a 4-hour meeting. Now you say it is a normal meeting, an ordinary meeting, but the normal arrangement is 2 hours. Now this is an additional meeting, and we notified members on the 5th of March. Why the hurry? Because this is the artificial island and the funding has to be passed. Ms. Mo, what is your question on this item? How do you know I'm not going to raise a question related to this? Just now, Alvin Young asked that it is a feasibility study, and if it is found that it is not feasible, will you withdraw your proposal? Of course not. The government is to make it a fait accompli. You've put in hundreds of millions of dollars, and therefore you will continue to put billions after billions. You are going to do it bit by bit. When you started the proposal, $1,000 billion. How many zeros after one? It's 12 zeros after the letter 1. After the number, the integer 1. And you didn't Originally, you didn't tell people how much that would cost, and then after much pressing, you say just $600 billion. And now we only have a surplus of about $1,000 billion. Is it really financially feasible? The PWSC consider all the public works projects. Nobody is against building hospitals and schools, but there are many queer things. $300 million for a subway or several $100 million for a footbridge. This one seems to be cheap, but it's only a preliminary feasibility study, and you just treat us as idiots. You're trying to cheat. You are trying to deceive all of us. I don't blame the officials. They are doing their work. It's their job. But the whole administration is trying to ram through everything, which is really unreasonable. Now you say feasibility study. And it seems that it's feasible, and therefore we are going to conduct a feasibility study. Even if it is really feasible, then what about the financial implications? Can our financial capability be able to cope with that? What about the financial feasibility? Well, we are confident that it is financially viable. You are not the FS, so from whom are you quoting? Our estimate. Yes, go on. The cost is about $600 billion spread over 10 to 15 years is about $40 to $50 billion, and our annual expenditure is about $100 billion, and therefore that's affordable. This is why. Now, if there is a feasibility study, then there will be no project that is not feasible. It's about how much. It's not about feasibility, in fact. Now, if you're going to build 1,700 hectares or 1,000 hectares first, then this is what you're going to do. Now you're going to build a CBD, a third CBD. With the passage of the Fugitive Amendment Order bill, will Hong Kong's international business center status be undermined? Have you considered that? Carrie Lam asked us to live in the GBA and find jobs in GBA. How will that affect Hong Kong's role as a international business center and the third core business district? I have not finished. Let me finish. I thought that you had finished, and therefore I asked the reply. You also said that if you build this artificial island, then it would provide space for urban redevelopment. Will you conduct a study on urban redevelopment? Will there be a large-scale urban redevelopment project to support your thinking? If there is, then can you provide information? If there is none, how dare you say this? Yes, let me finish my question. Now, through this island, it will bring relief to traffic congestion in NT Northwest. Without this island, NT Northwest, in the NT Northwest, there will be traffic congestion, and there is no relief without this island. First, on the CBD, I asked the planning department colleague to explain why it is suitable for a third CBD. As for redevelopment, now the artificial island in Kao Yi Chau is very close to the urban area. It's just 4 kilometers from Western District. One major difficulty of redevelopment is to relocate the residents living in the urban area, and they are reluctant to move. So you want to do urban redevelopment. You have a plan to redevelop old buildings 50 or 60 years ago, and will you incorporate Meifu Sanchun in the urban redevelopment area? Well, the relocation or provisioning is not just pertaining to a particular housing estate.
課題。而我哋第
Relocating originally inhabited population is a great issue. This artificial islands project would help the urban renewal of the city center. As to the traffic problem of Northwest New Territories, if we look at the railway, if you look at the railway development strategy, well, we looked at the Chunwan and Chunmun line because these terminals are well populated, but in the middle, it is not so developed. However, artificial islands that will provide 30,000 population so that in the middle part can be developed. So along the whole rail line, whether the services that we provide or other development needs, that will be provided for. Well, Undersecretary, please briefly respond. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the questions. Hong Kong is all along international financial center. To maintain our competitiveness, land supply is an important element. And 2030 plus up until 2040, the category A, grade A of offices has a lot of requirements, needs. If we look at the past data from up to 2016, we have a 3% GDP. However, the office expansion rate is not in keeping with the rate. There are about 8% vacant rate for offices. For category A in the central, the vacancy rate is about 4%. So there is a great urgent need. If we look at the central waters, there is only about 10 kilometers away from the CBD on the island, and there are 15. It is about 15 kilometers from the airport. So this will allow us to have a clustering effect. I hope that the chair will review your decision for voting on the last set item. And I think that there is an accumulative effect on the ambience of the meeting. Well, there are 4 parallel meetings, and you are voting here, and they are voting over there. So I am not attacking you personally. I don't think that you should be narrow-minded. You have to review the way you are conducting the voting. Chairman, I have explained and I have followed the procedure. Mr. Cheng Sung Tai, please raise your question. I'd like to ask, the Central Waters Artificial Islands, for the studies, it should include the artificial islands and the Lantau future. Well, there is also a double gateway. Now, I would like to ask, the CE said that for the usage of the Guangzhou, Zhuhai, and Zhuhai and Hong Kong bridge, well, for the follow-up, Are there any new data available? Or would you take into consideration all situations? The bridge usage would also be taken into account, or are you updating current policies? Do we know the orientation of the studies now? For the financing approval, we are providing money for transport infrastructure. We are basing on data to estimate the transport needs, and according to these needs, making proposals. According to the arrangements as we have now, you are not only taking into account the actual flow of traffic on the bridge, not only the estimates that you made in the beginning. Now, for the central waters, for the regional traffic estimation, it is not a small figure. The traffic infrastructure, the consultants' fees are very high. So we'd like to know, has that include the updated policy needs? Simply put, we'll take into account the new policy as well as the new situation in our estimation of the transport needs. Well, if that is so, the consultant fees and the studies, would you provide us with some further information? Consultant fees have included such studies, but for instance, the basic studies on the transport needs, as well as the traffic flow of the different parts. Mr. Oh Nok-hin, 3 minutes. Lantau, tomorrow, the answers that you have made have already betrayed yourself in the first round. The ELM, the traffic impact on the Kennedy town, were the outcomes of studies you have not taken into account. Another repeat. So the traffic studies is what you have asked for. How come that you have not taken into account the findings? Because the findings said that there are things that are not feasible. The media should take into account extract 5.3 says that the 5 roads, Khao Yi Chao, connecting to Kennedy Road and elsewhere, you have to have a toll. Otherwise, the Khao Yi Chao to well, the traffic rate will be will have a congestion. Now it's 1.7, and there is 1.3 rate for the other routes. When we talk about the Hong Kong line, it will be up to 4 ppsm. So East Lantau, Khao Yi Chao connection to the Canadian town, the traffic would explode. For all who live on island, especially in Palo Street, the capacity is 2,400 PCR. Even if you have number 4 trunk road, the VAC ratio will be up to 1.2. Why is it that the findings are not in the findings do not match your expectations, and you are putting it into the rubbish bin? How are you going to deal with the findings of the studies that you have commissioned. The CEDD has not yet answered all the questions. This study is not done by the consultants, but by the CEDD ourselves. We have looked at the findings, and we find that there are no there are no problems that cannot be solved. Now, I would like to explain. The traffic studies can be of reference, but that was made in 2015 and 2016. There are parameters that are different from today. At that time, the studies were made on the basis of 2013 plus. However, the communication alignment, we have one additional line coming from Tuen Mun to Lantau and to Kaoyizhou and then to the island. Well, there are trunk roads that we will study if there are trunk roads from north of Lantau to Qingyi. What has Qingyi to do with the island? What are the improvements that have been made for the traffic on the island? Your time is up, but you have given no time for response. Well, you have to push your button again, Mr. Fernando Cheung. 4 minutes. Well, the answer has gone beyond 1 minute. You have spent your time. You are not allowing time for response. Mr. Fernando Cheung. Mr. Au, you should press your button again. Mr. Fernando Cheung, 4 minutes. Lantau tomorrow. You are saying that according to the estimation of the government is about over 600 billion. That was the figure given last year. However, in engineering, you are not giving a figure MOD, but based on past figures, not MOD. Because you are using past figures as a basis, the estimation is low. You said that there may be 700 to 1,000 billion of land sale revenue. Now you are speaking of feasibility study. Is this really a feasibility study? Financially speaking, you cannot have such a rough estimation. It's about 600 billion costs for the works. But however, you are speaking of over 100 billion engagement for reclamation. You are saying that you can recover the costs and even have some profits made. You are saying that 70% of the housing will be for the public and 30% for private housing. There are lots of infrastructure involved. There is a traffic network being proposed. Now you have you're proposing a CBD. Are you going to have occupancy for this CBD? The northern part of the Lantau, you have also a CBD. Now you have on the island CBD. You have another CBD on the East Kowloon area. There are so many CBDs now proposed. Are you going to have business occupancy? You don't have figures. and you are using the figures of professional society, it's rarely seen that for such a huge scale of project, you don't really have hard figures. Well, you are not really a feasibility study. You are now are you going to aim for a consultancy report for implementation? You have done no feasibility study for financing, and you are now throwing a great deal of money into such a proposal. Whether we can be affordable financially? No. We have over 1,000 billion, several thousand billion. It is not a question of affordability. It is a matter of cost effectiveness. It is a long-term investment. It is not for raking in money from land sale. The preliminary studies would have a role to play for economic development. If we have 180,000 units, if we can provide land for other uses, that is a long-term project. Well, give us a financial viability report. Well, in this study, we will also look at financial feasibility, where the studies on infrastructure, on transport, while financing is also part of the studies. Well, you deem it as financial feasibility report studies? I'm talking about the whole of your proposal, the financial feasibility studies. Well, it's only a railway feasibility study. We are talking about the engineering planning as well as transport infrastructure. And in this here, financial feasibility is also involved. However, in the report itself, I have not seen anywhere the feasibility study for your finances in this consultancy report. Can you point it out to me? Well, in the planning and P&E, there will be financial assessment. Well, verbally, you are saying that, but on paper, there is nowhere to be seen. I'm sorry. Time's gone. Well, Undersecretary, a brief response, please. As for the P&E, there are many parts, and financial assessment is one part. Well, yes, that is clear. Financial feasibility report, feasibility study is involved. Well, I'm sorry, your time is up. The meeting goes until 12:50, so the next meeting is next Wednesday at 8:30 in the morning. Well, what we have adopted will be forwarded to the Financial Committee. The meeting is adjourned.